Told you to let me push pause. Michaela, I'd love it if you'd give us a quick background on you and how you came to us, and then let's dive into our topic for today.
That sounds good. Um, I am Michaela Giffen, grew up in Southeast Missouri, moved to Tennessee for college, and have been here ever since. I married a row crop farmer in Northwest Tennessee. So I have a lot of experience communicating with him on financial topics, brainstorming operational ideas, and that really kind of motivated me to learn more about it and eventually reach out to Ranch Right a couple years ago. And so we started as a client, and um, it's just kind of grown into what it is today. I actually started working full time for Ranch Right in March of this year and came
Uh,
from FSA, where I was a farm loan officer first and then a farm loan support specialist.
Very good. All right. What is today's topic?
We're going to talk about the power of profit, and it's going to be a follow-up, kind of getting back to the basics of our financial statements. And I know the last webinar we talked about the balance sheet, and this time we're going to talk about the P&L, the profit and loss statement, what that measures, what it means, and how we can improve over time to get closer to our goals.
Excellent. Very good. Well, let's dive in.
Okay.
And I think, Michaela, you would prefer questions as you go. Is that right?
I would, yeah.
Good. So please feel free to interrupt, jump in, ask us. Don't wonder. If we're covering stuff you don't understand, press us.
Mm-hmm. All right, I gotta get to the right spot in my PowerPoint.
And you're going to have to start sharing your screen also. Just out of curiosity, while she's doing that, Rex, I don't know if I know you. Where are you from? What brings you to us?
I'm my brother and I are ranchers in southwestern Montana,
All right. Whereabouts,
and
like Dillon, Southwest, or?
Drummond area in between
Okay.
Missoula.
Uh-huh.
Attended Ranching for Profit 20 some years ago. Was on the EL for quite a while, back when they were first starting it up. And then we sent three of our kids could make it last year to the Ranching for Profit Youth
Oh, great.
camp they did in Dexter, and you guys have been inviting us on to watch these. And I'm doing books today, so I'm watching you guys on one screen and doing books on the other.
I love it. Very good. And Tyler Mann, your name rings a bell and I can't place it. Where are you from? Give me some background, if you will. If you can talk, you're muted.
Hey, can you hear me? Sorry about
Yep,
that.
now I can.
Yeah, now I'm from Eastern North Carolina.
Oh, cool. How'd you find us?
Uh, I don't know, just been diving in, trying to figure out what in the world is going on and led me to y'all. To be honest,
I love it.
I'm a row crop farmer. We've always had cows, and I just started a direct to customer meat with we actually have pastured hogs and lamb and beef now, and we also farm, or we row crop too.
Very good. All right. Michaela, you ready?
I think so. Can you see my PowerPoint?
I can. Looks good.
And can
One
you
thing you'll
see?
notice is that Michaela has slightly better PowerPoint skills than Walter and I do. Not as a slam on anybody. It's just a little different.
Different, yes. Are you able to see my mouse as the laser pointer?
Yes, the little red thing. Yep.
Yep, perfect. Okay. Okay, so like we just talked about, today we're going to be digging into the profit and loss statement, specifically the mechanics of how this report works and the relationship between income and expenses. And then, just like at the end of the profit and loss, you get to see your profit. We're going to end our talk today talking about the power of profit and how it can impact our lives as we pursue our financial goals. If you know me, you know that I am a big fan of visuals. I'm a visual learner, and I also like metaphors. So I'm going to start today with a metaphor, and we'll continue that as we go through the day. But I'm going to say your business is a vehicle, and a good business is a vehicle for building wealth. So as long as you take care of your vehicle, you keep the engine running well, you add fuel when you need to, and you don't let it run out, that machine is going to get you closer to your goals with each passing year. So let's break that down a little further. First, we've got the parts. Just like the parts of a vehicle, the business is made up of a bunch of parts that we call assets. Just like some vehicles are fancier than others, there are some businesses that probably have some components that aren't as critical as the others, but together they make the vehicle, and in this case, the business, unique, and then working together make the business run. And we're going to use a balance sheet to compare assets and liabilities, which help us understand both the business's risks and their opportunities. So the balance sheet, John went over this last month, or no, it wasn't last month, it was 2 months ago, right, John?
2 months ago, yeah, we took a month off.
Okay, so on our last webinar 2 months ago, John broke down the balance sheet and explained how assets, liabilities, and equity all work together. And specifically, the balance sheet is about what a business has to work with today. That's the assets that it has. And then how those assets are acquired is either the liability portion or the equity portion. And all of this information comes together on a specific day, a snapshot in time, and that makes it very useful to compare progress as you go. So you compare the balance sheet over or on a specific day compared to another specific day, and you can see how you've grown. The engine is what we're going to be talking about today. So much like a vehicle's engine, a business's profitability is what propels it forward toward the owner's financial goals. And we use a profit and loss statement to measure and analyze the business's profitability. I'm not going to spend any more time on this now because we're going to be spending a lot of time on it later. But the last really important piece here in the metaphor is the fuel. We would never talk about an engine without acknowledging its need for fuel. We would never talk about a business without acknowledging its need for cash. So the cash is what actually allows the business to operate and create profit, just like a vehicle, the vehicle's engine would use fuel to create power. And we use a cash flow statement. These can come in many different forms, but the main thing is that we use the cash flow to actually measure and analyze a business's ability to finance its operations. So today, we're focusing on the engine and the power of profitability. And specifically, we're going to be measuring engine performance, looking at the different parts of the vehicle, fine-tuning the engine, and then finally bringing it all home with how this power helps you reach your financial goals. So let's start with measuring engine performance with the profit and loss statement. This is also called an income statement. And there's two important numbers at the end of the profit and loss. The first is the net operating income, and there are three main variables that go into this. It's your your income minus your direct expenses minus your overheads, and that's the formula for calculating the net operating income. This number represents the profit that is actually generated by the business's core operations. So it's a measure of profitability based on the work that's done every single day. Now, directly below net operating income, you're going to find net income. This is when you hear people talk about the bottom line, this is the bottom line. The main final number for profit, and it's calculated using the net operating income. We're going to add any other income that we have, and it's basically just non-operating income. So sometimes it comes in the form of insurance or government payments, and this can be handled differently. Some people would classify like a crop insurance payout as operating income. Someone else might call it non-operating. The main thing is that it does show up as income somewhere. That's just one example of other income. The other big category here is other expense, and this category always includes interest, so interest paid on debts. And because that is a financing charge, so it's how we finance the business, we're not including that in the actual operations of the business. So what we're left with when we take net operating income, add any other income, subtract any other expense, what we're left with is the final profit that actually gets transferred to the balance sheet as retained earnings. Now, I want to pause here on the retained earnings because this is a really important connection to the balance sheet. So in our last webinar, I know John explained retained earnings, but this piece right here, the net income to retained earnings, that's how these two financial statements connect. So on the last webinar, John talked about how assets must always equal the combination of liabilities and equity. It's a closed system, and it's designed that way as a check and balance situation. And I remember when I was first trying to learn accounting, that kind of drove me crazy because sometimes I had trouble making them balance and match. But the one thing that really helped me with this was beginning to understand how equity can grow. So I'd like to just compare retained earnings to a few ways that equities can grow, and then we'll keep going.
Before you jump into this next part,
Mm-hmm.
for reference, a lot of people familiar and sort of accountants and that will often call net operating income NOI and income and net income NI. If you are in Canada and you're a QuickBooks user there, Canada dispenses with net operating income and just has one final line at the bottom of the P&L that they call profit. To my mind, the bottom line of the P&L is related to profit, but not 100% the same thing. So I don't want to get into that distinction now. Just make sure you're kind of familiar. So Joy, since I know you're on here, she's a Canadian user. Your vocabulary is just slightly different around this stuff. And it looks like we've got a question from Treg.
Yeah, net income isn't necessarily cash, right? Because it has the beginning, ending inventory change.
Coming soon to a presentation near you.
Yeah, excellent question. We will, if you're willing, I'll answer that in just a few slides.
Perfect.
Okay. So let's briefly talk about growing equity. There's a couple ways we can do this. The first is owner investment. That's using personal funds to purchase assets for your business. This is often how businesses get started. So if you're starting a brand new business from scratch, you wouldn't have any earnings yet. This is what you would be using, either putting cash in or providing equipment so that you can operate and begin bringing cash into your business, or earnings into your business, I should say. Another way is buying below market value, something I know this audience is very familiar with. In this situation, you purchase an asset for less than it's worth and you hope the value doesn't go down. As long as the value stays high, then you've grown your equity. If it goes down, then your equity goes down. This is not very much in your control after you make the initial purchase. Another, I would say, very common option in agriculture, something that we see commonly, is market appreciation. This is one of the biggest contributors to equity in agricultural businesses or agricultural families because of the appreciation of land. And I would say that it's unfortunately can be a crutch for some operations because the balance sheet is showing growth, even though it's not happening through retained earnings. So in this case, that can be dangerous because, Treg, like you said, you're looking for cash to actually be able to pay bills and make payments and have an influence on your life. Market appreciation does not do those things, right? So it does increase your balance sheet, or your equity, I should say. But you can only access that increase by borrowing against it, which in some cases works fine. If you're going to make another purchase and you want to use it for equity for collateral, that works great. But it's not something that you can actually use and feel in your everyday life. Which brings us to the last and most important way to grow your equity, and that is net income. And it's created, like we just said, through business operations. So whenever you're producing calves, lambs, chickens, steaks, corn, beans, whatever you're producing, when you do that work every day and producing that value, that's going to flow through your net or your profit and loss statement to the bottom, net income, and that's what's going to flow over into your retained earnings. So this is the most powerful and sustainable source of equity growth because this is what we have control over. I know there's lots of things we can't control about production, right? But this is where we have extreme influence over our operations, and we can use this. It's a repeatable, scalable way that we can improve our lives on a daily basis while growing our equity. So we've got net income, which flows into retained earnings. And from there, you get to choose. You can keep it in your business and continue to scale, grow the business, make more money. You can alternatively use it for goals outside the business, which we'll talk more about later. The main thing is it gives you the freedom to choose.
I've got a question
Yeah.
on your market appreciation.
Mm-hmm.
What are we talking about there?
I am mostly talking about land appreciation.
That's what I was going to say. You can borrow against it or you can sell it.
Mm-hmm.
But on your inventory appreciation, you can trade it and capitalize and still be in business. Just wanting to clarify that.
That's good. And I'm glad you brought that up because when you're trading inventory, that appreciation, or when you capture that appreciation, it actually is going to show up on your P&L. So it will filter down. Market appreciation in that sense actually kind of combines with net income. And that is a very important distinction. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Good question.
Mm-hmm. All right. And if we're ready, we will dig into the parts of the engine. How do income and expenses work together to create profit? And we'll start with income. Agricultural production falls into one of two buckets, and together we call them gross product. The first bucket is revenue. So this is cash coming in from the sale of goods produced or services provided. And I am visualizing this here with this lovely gold bar. The second bucket is inventory. And this is value that has been created you know, appreciated, like Wally said, but it's still being held for future sale. So the value has been created, the calves have been produced, the lambs have been grown, the crop has been harvested, but it's being stored. So you've created the value, but it's not actually shown up in your bank account yet. And I've got a smaller bar here to represent inventory change. But in reality, we're calling them the same thing, gross product, or together they make up the same thing called gross product, which is the total value produced by the business during this period. And the ratio there of revenue to inventory change is going to look different for every business. And it's probably going to look different years or different times within the year. The important thing is just to realize the main difference between revenue and inventory change is revenue has shown up in your bank account from an actual sale. The inventory change is still being held and it is there, but just not, the value has been created, it's just not been realized. Okay, so once you have your your income represented by this top bar, the next thing we have to do is pay expenses. And first, we're going to pay direct expenses. So these are expenses that increase with each additional unit produced. Common examples on a ranch would be feed and vet bills. Common examples on a farm would be seed, fertilizer, chemical. So as you think about direct expenses, these are the expenses that increase proportionally with an increase in production units. So when we say production units, depending on what kind of operation you have, we're talking about your main source of production. So on a ranch, it could be cattle, it could be lambs, it could be any kind of livestock. On a farm, it would most likely be acres farmed. Either way, as you increase your head or you increase your acres, these expenses, these examples of direct expenses are going to increase proportionally. So we'll go ahead and move our direct expenses up. Now, first question. Does anyone know why we move direct expenses to the left instead of to the right?
Because you can control them.
Control what specifically?
How big they are? I don't know.
Yeah, well, you can control how big they are. And that does offer a clue here. We want to make sure they're not bigger than this for the time being. Our revenue is bringing cash into our bank accounts. And to be able to pay our direct expenses, we need to use that cash rather than focusing on this inventory change. So when
Hard to pay your
do that-
direct costs with inventory value, right?
Right. If you've got calves in the field or grain in the bin, your suppliers, whoever's carrying you can't go buy seed with calves, right? Or you can't buy feed with calves. So we're going to have to pay our direct expenses with the actual cash brought in by revenue. So once we move our direct expenses over here to the left, we can see how much of our revenue is taken up by direct expenses. What is this left, or this part that's left here? Would anybody like to guess?
Overheads.
That's a good guess. That's gonna be in the next step. So what do you have to be able to pay your overheads? We're gonna call this gross profit. Overheads is coming next. So we've got, if you look at this total amount here, this total bar on the top as gross product, the total value produced, we've paid our direct expenses out of our revenue, and this leftover portion is gross profit. So if we're following the money through this chart, anything that's in gold is the money we have. So this is the money that came in, or I'll say the value that came in. This is the value that is remaining. Does that make sense? Do we have any questions about that part? To get this number,
So the size of your bar from left to right is an estimate of the magnitude, right? So we start with that total gross product, and that is equal to the direct costs plus the gross profit, right? Because they're the same length.
right?
Okay.
Yeah, said another way, the formula for gross profit is just gross product, or the total value produced, minus your direct cost. And we have another way to view it, as a percentage. So you can either view gross profit as the amount, the actual dollars left over, or you can see it as a percentage. So what percentage of my dollars do I keep? So let's put some numbers to it. If we've got $10 of gross product, we've generated $10 worth of value. This appears to be about 70%, or I should say about $3 worth of direct expenses and about $7 worth of gross profit. The percentage, or expressed as a percentage for gross margin, would be about 70% of our dollar, or of the value we created, remains. So for every dollar worth of value we create, 30 cents goes to direct expenses, and about 70 cents remains for paying overheads and generating profit.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's talk overheads.
Good mommy, okay.
Once you have your gross profit defined, the next step is to pay your overheads. And these are expenses that allow the business to operate, and don't necessarily increase with any additional units produced. Examples include labor, equipment, administrative cost, cash rent, opportunity rent, and depreciation. So let's address these little asterisks. We've got opportunity rent and depreciation here, both have asterisks. They are what we call non-cash overheads. So these expenses and others like them, they are included to give us an accurate representation on the profit and loss, but no money is actually leaving your bank account, which is why we call them non-cash. So let's think about a few examples here. If you own the land you're operating, but don't actually write yourself a check for rent, maybe you don't need the money, or you want to keep the money invested in the business for any reason at all, if you don't actually write yourself a check, you should still create an opportunity rent expense as an overhead, because this holds your operation accountable. If you weren't renting it from yourself, or if you didn't own the land, you'd have to rent someone else's land, and that expense would be there. So in order to hold our operations accountable, we input that as a non-cash overhead. The important distinction here is you will most likely have some portion of your overheads that are non-cash expenses. We're going to include them as overheads to hold ourselves accountable, but that money would still be available. In this example, we're just saying like this little piece here is still available to actually pay tax and service debt. The thing it is not available for is profit, right? We don't consider this little piece profit because it would be an expense if we didn't have this specific circumstance. Another good example of that is deferred wages. If you have non-farm income and you don't need to take money out of the business, you can just create an expense for deferred wages, because if you weren't doing the work, you would have to pay someone else to do the work. So you want to include that expense to hold yourself accountable. and get a more accurate picture of profitability for your operation. Any questions on that? Okay.
Well, that's kind of the opposite of the non-cash income, right, Treg? We have adjustments on our production side for things that we don't actually receive cash for, and we have adjustments on the expense side for things we don't actually pay cash for.
Okay, does anyone want to guess what the leftover piece is here? Once you've paid direct expenses and your overheads, what's left?
Net income.
Net operating income. Yes.
Net op.
Gonna
Yep.
say purchases.
Did you say purchases?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so I did not even get into the trading account for this presentation. We should probably have a webinar about the trading account.
We'll do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got net operating income left over here. This is your profit from your operations, the amount of income that remains that's available for paying taxes, servicing your debt, and then actually having leftover additional profit that can be used as the owner sees fit. Okay, so we have finally reached net operating income. It is profit, but is all profit equal?
Quiet crowd today.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody okay? We hot
No.
and tired, had a long day outside sweating.
Okay, so here's our net operating income. We're gonna draw a line from this portion of revenue and inventory change. We're gonna draw a line straight down, and we're gonna split this net operating income into two different types of profit. We have unrealized profit, and the definition of unrealized profit is almost exactly the same as inventory change. It's value that was produced by the business but is still held in inventory, which makes it unrealized and unavailable. So it is profit. It was value that was created, wasn't consumed by direct expenses or overheads. Unfortunately, we can't actually use it until we sell those assets and generate that profit or that cash. So I think that answers your question, Treg, that profit is not necessarily cash.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, so then we have realized profit, the amount of revenue that remains after all operating expenses are paid. So again, this revenue represents cash in the bank. When you draw the line straight down here, you can see how much of your profit is left over in the form of cash that can be used. You can use this for taxes, debt service, or whatever other financial goals you have. Just to clarify a bit more, what does profit actually do for us? What is the goal with these different types of profit? Unrealized profit is the portion of your profit that's still invested in your business. Hopefully, it's working to make you more money, which should be. And it does show up as an increase in equity on the balance sheet. It just does not show up in your bank account.
Is unrealized profit.
Mm-hmm.
What did you say, Wally? Did you get cut off? I only got the beginning of that.
It is unrealized profit. Is that like retained earnings and it's not taxed? I mean,
Well, it's not retained earnings yet. And there's really kind of a blurred line here, John. I'd be interested to know your thoughts. When your inventory is showing a profit, it's going to, or when it shows a gain, it's going to show up on the profit and loss. But it's on your balance sheet, it's not going to show up in retained earnings, it's going to show up in your actual livestock accounts, your
So
inventory.
it'd be like keeping all your ewe lambs or something in our
Mhm.
case, as opposed to selling them. We've got to account for that value somewhere, but it's not cash, right?
That's right.
So that would be unrealized profit.
That's right. So
So
it's
it-
still growing your business, but you can't pay taxes with it.
And you generally in the US will not be taxed on it. That's not 100% correct, but I think that is very, unrealized gains generally are not taxed. Good question.
So, yeah, Wally, your question of does it show up in retained earnings? I think the gain in inventory, the increase in inventory would primarily show up as an increase in your inventory accounts.
Okay, I'd agree with you.
And it will become a component of the retained earnings,
Right.
as you'll see as we keep going here.
Okay, so realized profit is the profit you can see in your bank account and use. Specifically, if we make a profit, we generate income, we're going to be paying taxes. There's a good chance we'll be making debt payments. And then you have the option, the choice for what to do with the rest of it. So one good option is reinvesting in your business. If you don't need the money in your personal life, you can reinvest it in your business and make more money. Or you could use it to improve your personal life, which is absolutely within a business owner's right. Okay, I didn't tell you there was going to be a pop quiz, but here we have a little check. So I've got A, B, C, D, and E. I'll give you a few minutes here to write down. We're specifically looking for names. So we've got revenue and inventory change here. So what would you call A? Here's your direct cost. What would you call B? Here's your overheads. So what would you call C? And then how would you break up C into D and E?
Keep telling myself I'm going to get the Jeopardy music track to play during these, and I keep forgetting to do it.
Mm-hmm. I thought about trying to download one that was like, or ding ding. Like,
Yeah, right.
I thought that might be too much pressure though.
That's good. No, I like it. That's
She's
a
way
great
better at putting together slides than you, John.
Yeah, I'm with you. That's the reason she's doing it.
Yes.
Turns out she's better than me at a lot of things.
No, I'll let John do the talking and I'll just do the slides in the background.
I will say one thing, John Haskell, if she isn't better at doing stuff than you, then you either need to quit or you don't. I mean,
I'm with you. I know.
we hire people that are better than you.
I love that idea.
That is the only, I mean, period. If you're going to grow, sometimes it's very humbling, but you need to be out there running with people that are smarter than you, in my humble opinion.
I couldn't agree more.
That's my favorite thing about these webinars.
I second that. Yeah.
I think, it might put some people to sleep, but I think this is the only place you can go and find people who are just extremely motivated by this type of conversation.
Yep.
Okay. Does anybody want to shout out A?
Gross product.
Say,
Ding, ding, ding. I didn't download the sound, but great job.
But you're good at it. It works.
How about B?
Gross profit.
Yes. And
Very
C?
Paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
Net
Realized
operating
and
income.
unrealized profit.
Yes. Okay, so I heard both of them. We've got net operating income, and then we've got unrealized and realized profit. Very good. Okay, few more questions. Now we're going to replace, I've given you some dollar figures here. John likes to do complicated math, but I like to do really easy math. So we're working with like single digit numbers here.
Nice.
We're going to replace the title that you just plugged in with numbers. So how much gross product do we have? I hope nobody's offended by my first grade math.
$10.
$10. Good job. And gross profit?
$7.
Yep. We started with 10. We got $3 in direct costs, so that leaves us with 7. And then this is kind of a step in between here. We're going to stop and calculate gross margin. So I don't have gross margin pointed out here. We got a guess on gross margin?
Zero? Or no?
Back to the definition.
Yeah.
Is it 3?
Well, okay, so the gross margin is going to be a percentage. I'll
Oh,
give you
70%.
yeah. There you
that's
go.
it. Yeah.
Is that Joy?
Yep.
Good
Ding, ding,
job,
ding.
Joy. Nice work.
Yeah, so we've got a 70% gross margin, and we're going to talk more. This will make, I hope it'll make more sense in a minute, but I wanted to go ahead and get these kind of definitions out here so that we have the language to discuss exactly how to use gross margin as we go forward. So yes, to calculate gross margin, we're taking the gross profit and dividing that by the gross product. Said another way, we're asking ourselves how much of every dollar we create is left over after paying direct cost. So yes, Joy, 70%. Now, how much net operating income? This is kind of like those Sudoku puzzles. You know, you have a few numbers to start with and you have to fill in the blanks.
$3.
Very good. Okay,
This
now we got a
guy.
few bonus points here. Unrealized profit versus realized profit.
$1.
Which one?
Realized.
Yes. Good. This is where I showed my husband this beforehand because I was nervous. And he was like, I don't know. That looks like 75 cents to me. I was like, okay, so my proportions aren't perfect, but yes, if you follow the whole numbers there, we've got $2 of unrealized profit and $1 of realized profit.
You
Okay,
must
so
have
the
a better
most
ruler than I do.
yeah. The most important question of all, is this enough profit to support your goals? So you can look at this two different ways. This whole section here is profit. And if your only goal is to grow your business, scale your business, continue to reinvest every dollar of profit in your business, then you may be satisfied with a 30% profit margin. That's pretty good. This whole 30% is going to, it's working to create more money for you. But if you have other goals, like supporting your family, it's specifically like if you don't have non-farm income and you need to support your family with farm profit or ranch profit, if you want to purchase land, if you want to take on other debt, if you want to make other investments like a retirement account, anything that requires after-tax dollars is going to have to come out of this section.
Wouldn't supporting your family come out of your salary, which would be in your overheads, presumably?
I'm glad you brought that up. Yes, you're right. I should maybe say, if you were gonna go like above and beyond family living, thank you
Okay.
for making that distinction. We hope you're paying yourself a reasonable salary, if not in cash, at least in deferred wages, which would show up in overheads. So anything above and beyond your traditional family living expenses may have to come out of realized profit. If you want to build $1 million house, you could either pay yourself a really great high salary, or you could just realize that it's going to come out of realized profit. Very
That
good
does
point.
depend a little on accounting method. We, lots of accountants, if you're a sole prop or even a partnership, will go ahead and do that as an owner draw. We do put it on the P&L as a wage for that reason. Not necessarily a real payroll wage, but we account for it that way directly so that it's consistent between corporation style businesses, partners, and sole proprietorships.
Okay, so if you decide that you would like to grow this portion, we need to fine tune the engine. So what tools do we have available for increasing profits? We have three. I probably should have had a slide that said that. There's three main tools here. We're going to start with increasing gross product. All right, so here we go. Here's our gross product, this line at the top. The main way to increase gross product is increasing production. This is increasing the number of production units, which would be scaling your operation, or you can produce more from the same number of units. Now, there is some nuance here. The most direct way to understand this is scaling your operation would increase your production units and make the whole pie bigger. And all of this will be proportional. It would just make the entire thing bigger. The producing more from the same number of production units or increasing yield, we have to be a bit more careful with that analysis. For instance, if you were going to increase your weaning weights by adding more feed, that might make sense and it might not. What we don't want to do is increase our gross product $1 by spending another $1 of direct expenses. That would just be spinning our wheels and adding more work for no gain. So when we talk about increasing gross product, it's really important to recognize that we're trying to make the whole pie bigger without increasing the expenses at the same rate. Specifically, we would try to keep direct costs per unit the same, or in this example, it's going to be the same. We for sure don't want the direct cost per unit to increase more than the revenue or the inventory change increases, and overheads don't change. So as we make this change and increase the whole gross product, the whole pie, if you watch, this revenue is going to move over. It's not going to change the size. And direct expenses, because we know it increases as you increase your production units. Let me say that differently. The total amount of direct expenses is going to go up if you increase your production units. So if we scale and increase our gross product that way, the total amount of direct expenses will increase at the same proportionally. So this is what it looks like to make the whole pie bigger. When you drag it this way, your direct expenses, the total does get bigger, but it should still be about 70%. The overheads does not get bigger, it just slides over and your realized profit increases. So I'm gonna go back. This is what it was before.
So would that be like running more units over the same land base?
It could be.
What else could contribute to that, Michaela? You're going to go into that, right?
Yeah, so you could absolutely run the same or more units on the same land base. That would be a great way to do it. You can scale
More
by
turnover.
more turnover. You can actually like grow with more land. So if you think,
Well, wouldn't more land increase your overhead though?
yes, it's so in a ranching situation, yes, it would. Well, actually, in all situations, yes, it would. It's a little bit more straightforward if you're thinking directly in terms of like farming. As you grow your acres, like your machinery costs aren't going to increase, for example, unless you grow it by a lot. But like you're saying, the rent does increase, so overheads could increase some. I think turnover and increasing the production units, like in terms of livestock, the number of head you're running, those are really good examples.
Could be
Other
more, it could be growing more forage on the same land base, right? Because your direct expenses
Right.
are actually gonna go down in that case.
100%. Yep. Or increasing the days grazed by increasing your utilization. Weaning calves by having more efficient cows. In some cases, crop yield could be another way to improve this. If you're, like, say, for instance, you're planting the crop sooner, you get more growing days, that could increase your yield with no extra direct cost. So y'all are thinking about this exactly the right way. We're trying to increase that top line without changing the percentage of direct cost or significantly changing the overheads. And Treg, if it does change the overheads, we want to pay close attention to that and make sure that we're not just spinning our wheels. We want to make sure that this realized profit is, well, and unrealized profit, any of the profit is actually growing.
Michaela, an increase there isn't necessarily sort of fatal to the idea of doing it. We just want to make sure we're increasing revenue significantly faster than we're increasing costs.
Right.
Yeah, I think you've talked about that some, John. You're talking about we've cutting back so much to a detriment to the actual business itself. That was
Yep.
my open to me. So increasing overheads isn't necessarily a bad thing. Just make sure you're increasing your revenue proportionally more,
Yep.
right?
That's right.
Okay.
Very good. I just wanted to mention also another way you can increase your top line, your gross product, is through marketing. And the marketing whatever you produce better actually creates a double benefit because you're increasing your revenue without increasing any cost, unless there may be a higher commission or something like that. For the most part, learning to market your livestock, learning to market your grain is going to produce a double benefit there. Increases your top line and improves your gross margin. Which leads us to our next tool, which is improving gross margin. When we improve gross margin, and remember, gross margin is the percentage of direct, well, it's the percentage of income that is left over after you pay your direct expenses. So in this case, we're working with this line right here. Shifting it this way would be an improvement. Shifting it this way would, well, boy, my mind's drawing a blank. What's the opposite of improvement? It would be going
worse.
the wrong way. Yeah, it would be worse. Yeah. So when we decrease our direct cost per unit, we're keeping more of the income brought in by each production unit. This increases our gross profit, this part here that's left over, and provides more money to cover overheads and still have profit left over. So in this case, when we're talking about improving gross margin, we're not talking about bringing in more money or creating more value. Our top line is going to stay the same. When we talk about improving gross margin, we are just talking about shifting this line over, decreasing our direct expenses per production unit so that less money is going to direct expenses and more of our money is staying as gross profit. Improving gross margin means you're taking the direct costs are taking a smaller slice out of the total revenue pie. So gross product is not going to change. Overheads are not going to change. Part we're changing is this gross profit. So you can see, because we're not changing the size of the whole pie, improving this gross margin has a lesser effect than improving gross product, or at least in this case it does. We're just shifting this over, our overhead shift over, and our realized profit grows. And I keep saying realized profit, but really it's all profit. I consider just taking this separation out and just looking at net operating income again, because this percentage of revenue versus inventory change could change, and it's not significantly important when you're talking about improving gross margin. The main thing is we're increasing gross profit. So here it is again. Oop, okay, there it is. There's the original. And this is what it looks like to decrease your direct expenses and increase your gross profit. Any questions about that? So one really important point here is if you intend to go to use the first tool of increasing your gross product, you should make sure your gross margins are healthy first, because improving this percentage of income that stays as gross profit will be magnified as you scale your business. So either one works, right? Like you can improve your gross margin and make more money. You can increase your gross product and make more money. But if you combine the two, it becomes very powerful. And alternatively, if you have a bad gross margin and you try to scale, you cannot scale your way to profitability if you have a bad gross margin. In that case, the alternative here is if your direct expenses were taking up 50 or 60 or 70% of the value you're creating, and you try to scale that, you're going to be working that much harder and still getting just this, that small portion of income that can flow down to pay overheads and create profit. Okay, we've got one more tool. I thought about just leaving it here because I feel like this mule can explain this idea better than I could. But I will give it a try. So with overheads, these are the expenses that our business has to have to operate. They're necessary, they make the business possible. But they can get heavy if we aren't careful. And because every production unit has to pull, if you got to have enough production units to be able to pull your overheads before you can begin making profit. So if your production units are having a hard time pulling the weight of your overheads, you should consider lightening the load. So let's look up here at our chart. In this case, again, our gross product is not going to change. Our direct expenses are not going to change. In this case, the only thing that's changing is these overheads. And you can see we've only got so much to work with here. Like you mentioned earlier, Treg, you can cut and cut and cut, and at some point you're going to start hurting your business. So yes, we do want to make sure that your overheads aren't unreasonable, but if this is your scenario, if this is where you feel like you're at, and you've lightened the load as much as possible, then your only option is to add more mules, right? You're going to have to increase your gross product. But let's go ahead and see what overheads does for us. So you can see we decrease this overheads and we do have some increase in profits. But compared to the others, it's much less change. So the main takeaway here is make sure your overheads are reasonable and then focus on the other levers. We just want to make sure that the cart is as light as possible. And then we're going to focus on adding mules or making our mules more powerful. Okay, so our summary here for all of our tools, we've got 3 tools. And when it comes to understanding the business's engine, it's these tools and the relationship between income, direct expenses, and overheads that make all the difference. So we're going to increase gross product, which is arguably the most powerful tool because there's really no limit to how much you can increase gross product, especially when you combine it with the second tool, improving gross margin. This gives you a secret weapon for increasing profitability today with what you have and making future growth even more profitable, if that's part of your goals. And then our last tool is an important tool that can't be forgotten, shouldn't be forgotten. We've got to make sure your overheads are in check and that your production units that are creating that value for you are not being held back by the weight of operations. So this leads us to the next question. Where are you headed? When you start to make profit, let's say you've done all your fine tuning and your engine's where you want it to be and you're ready to go down the road. Where are you going first? I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but first you're going to have to stop at the IRS. So anytime you're making profit, you're going to have to pay a little tax. And you know, there are lots of ways to defer income, especially when you're running your own business, but eventually the tax will catch up with you. So any profit you make will eventually be taxed. So that's part of the emphasis on realized profit is we want to make sure we have enough realized profit to help with that tax bill. Now we're not going to focus on this, right? We're not going to let this part overwhelm us. We're going to try to make profit beyond whatever that tax bill might be so that we can continue to pursue our goals. And that's the point here. Once you get past the IRS, you get to pick what's next. So most of us have tangible goals, and turning these goals into a plan gives us a profit target, a clear direction, and a way to measure our success. So what are your goals? Profitability doesn't just determine how fast you can reach your financial goals. It also determines how much you can safely pull along the way. So this is where we were talking about, you know, Taylor, you very accurately pointed out, hopefully you're paying your family living expenses with the overhead, so you're paying yourself a wage. But beyond that, there's a lot of things that we might like to have in life that have to be paid for with after-tax dollars. And this has kind of been the theme in my life lately, talking to a lot of people about their goals. It can sometimes get lost that the money we're producing has to actually go through each of these layers. You know, we have to pay direct expenses, we have to pay our overheads, we have to pay our taxes, and then finally we get to what the stuff that we're actually trying to pursue. And these are things like personal investments, like land is a big one. Also, any retirement accounts require after-tax dollars. Personal expenses, like if you're looking to buy a new house, build a new house, if you need family vehicles, family vacations, all worthy goals, but they require after-tax dollars. So if your goals feel heavy, identifying your priorities and your long-term vision can help you choose a target profit and make a plan for success. And you know, what we wanted to focus on today was the mechanics for how the profit and loss works. You know, it's important to understand each part and how it relates, how it works together, and how you can influence that. But really, none of this matters if you don't know what you're trying to accomplish. And that's where we want to go with next month's webinar. Next month, we would like to do some profit planning. So we want to consider your goals how much money you need to accomplish those goals, and then we're going to work backwards. So today we calculated profit from the top down, starting with revenue, subtracting out expenses, and then what was left over was left over. That was our profit. But we find a lot of value in starting with profit and then working backwards. And we can do that using these tools that we talked about today, understanding, using our overheads. First, we'll identify your goals and create a target profit. Then when you add your overheads to that, and you use your gross margin to determine what your gross cost or your direct cost would be, then that can give you a target gross product that you can begin to shoot for. And then once you have that gross product target, we can analyze how gross margin and overheads actually influence that path to success and can speed it up or slow you down. So as we prepare for next month's webinar, be thinking about your financial goals. And here's a few more. I left that question mark on the top one because I'm sure there's some, everybody's goals are unique. So be thinking about the things that are most important to you, the things you want your business to help you accomplish. And we're going to be digging into that in the next webinar. So there is no right decision, or there is no right destination. There's no perfect goals. It's only your goals and what you want your business to accomplish. Profitability and the power of profitability is freedom. The stronger your business's engine, the more power you have to choose your paths, explore new opportunities, and build the life you want. And that's what we want to help you do. That's all I've got for PowerPoint. Do we have any questions?
Stuff.
Now, are you guys gonna talk about, trying to do different entities within the businesses and looking at those and how you work backwards? If you're gonna say you're gonna make a big change from a cow calf operation, i.e. they're going to, say a fall or late spring calving to a yearling operation, and how to back plan and do your gross margins, gross profits off of that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Within an operation, you're going to have a gross margin, an average gross margin across for your enterprises. But I think it's a great point to consider that each enterprise could have a different gross margin, a different set of overheads, and you can absolutely dig into those and use those to improve your gross margin and your profitability overall.
And we call that an enterprise analysis, where we break it out different ways into different components, and then look at how each of those could impact the total outcome in the business. And Rex, you said you're Drummond, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Right. So
Paul.
in an environment like yours, we're probably going to see some enterprises work better than others, as opposed to somebody like Wally, who's down in Northeast Oklahoma, right? There's just going to be some pretty
Exactly.
environmental differences. Yeah.
Yeah, and just where we are and where people want to come recreate or whatever, just different.
Yep.
Each place has different opportunities to make
That's right.
enterprises run.
That's right. Other questions, thoughts, comments?
It was very good. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Michaela.
I enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you all for participating, helping me answer those questions.
Good. Well, as we wrap up here, I want to reemphasize again, the purpose of this webinar is to help people be more financially literate. And over again, I think Walter and I have really come to the agreement that It is this financial literacy that makes a huge difference in the operations of most of the businesses we work with. Those that are very successful often understand where they're trying to go, which is one of the things that Michaela talked about today, but more importantly, they understand how the different pieces fit together. It's one thing to know how to be really good at raising calves, and how to be really good at growing grass. It's quite another to understand how those things impact your financials. And I hope that the examples and the illustrations that Michaela has given today help give you a little more insight into how your daily activities impact your financial outcome, not just in this year, but over the course of your 30 or 40-year career. We have the opportunity over and over again to make choices. Most of us have a to-do list that is longer than the things we're going to do. We have a project list that is, bigger than the amount of money we have to spend. We have to make choices, and if we make well-informed choices, we have the opportunity to really change our situation. So that's what we're trying to accomplish here. And Michaela, great job. I'm really glad you put all this together. This is very nice.
Thank you.
You bet.
Real quick on the P&L,
Mhm.
where is total income gross product?
Correct. You've got a P&L for Treg is a customer of ours. He's got a P&L of ours. So yes, that line that is total income is your gross product.
Okay,
And so
perfect.
you'll notice you can look at it for each enterprise in your business, and you can look at the total for the business.
Okay, perfect.
Yep. Very good. We've reformatted that a little since last year, so it does look slightly different this year, but it's the same thing. It just looks a little different. We've tried to make it more compact. Good. Questions, thoughts? Great. Well, thank you very much for staying. Michaela, thank you very much for your presentation. Look forward to visiting with you again. And we do these webinars on the third Thursday of each month at 2 p.m. Mountain. Hopefully you can join us. There will also be a recording available on our YouTube channel. Strongly encourage you, if you haven't already seen it, take a look at our YouTube channel, like and subscribe, that stuff, obviously, and then also check out the Ranchonomics podcast. We talk about some of these same things and things related to them on the podcast. One of our recent podcasts with Travis, another member of our team, was talking about how our production activities influence our P&L, specifically gross product and grazing management. I also want to make sure everybody understands we have ranching.fyi has a sell-by marketing class in Sheridan, Wyoming at the end of this month. If you look up ranching.fyi, you can find the calendar for those. We have 2 others scheduled through the fall. That one in Sheridan and one other are kind of a fundamentals of sell-by marketing, and there will be more of an advanced sell-by marketing class. We also have a Monday morning sell-by marketing sort of open Q&A, and then on Thursday mornings we have a finance Q&A. So if you have specific questions about your financials and want to talk about those in a semi-public forum, you are more than welcome to do that. Anything else I'm missing, Michaela? Does that cover most of it?
I think that's it.
Good. I mentioned earlier it is the middle of summer. I don't know about your place. We've been cool the last couple days, but right before that, it's been hot and it's dry and the days are long. So this is the time when people have bad accidents. So please pay attention to what you're doing. Drink lots of water. Don't get tired and make bad decisions, because that's one of the type of thing that leads to wisdom, and you don't want to accumulate that too fast. Particularly, you don't want to accumulate it faster than your ability to digest it. So please be careful in July and August, because as the days are long and summer winds down, everybody gets a little worn down. So be safe. Thank you, Michaela. Thanks the rest of you for coming. We'll see you next month.
Thanks, Michaela.
Thank you.
Michaela, Kirsten is not here today, right? So we'll do our debrief. I think tomorrow she's back. Does that work?
It does.
Okay, fantastic. Nice work.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you. I'm not sure if I